Okay, just gonna try this out and see how it goes. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I am here and now. One, the behavior. We have our strategy in place. A behavior has occurred, one that is reprehensible, or wonderful, or floating ambiguously in between. What occurred in the prior second that triggered the behavior? This is the province of the nervous system. What occurred in the prior seconds to minutes that triggered the nervous system to produce that behavior? This is the world of sensory stimuli, much of it sensed unconsciously. What occurred in the prior hours to days to change the sensitivity of the nervous system to such stimuli? Acute actions of hormones, and so on, all the way back to the evolutionary pressures played out over the prior millions of years that started the ball rolling. So we're set. Except that when approaching this big, sprawling mess of a subject, it is kind of incumbent upon you to first define your terms, which is an unwelcome prospect. Here are some words of central importance to this book: aggression, violence, compassion, empathy, sympathy, competition, cooperation, altruism, envy, schadenfreude, spite, forgiveness, reconciliation, revenge, reciprocity, and, why not, love. Flinging us into definitional quagmires. Why the difficulty? As emphasized in the introduction, one reason is that so many of these terms are the subject of ideological battles over the appropriation and distortions of their meanings. I recently found a startling example of unorthodox defining of terms. This concerned Menachem Begin, one of the surprising architects of the Camp David peace accords in 1978 as the Prime Minister of Israel. In the mid-1940s, he headed the Irgun, the Zionist paramilitary group intent on driving Britain out of Palestine in order to facilitate the founding of Israel. The Irgun raised money to buy arms through extortion and robbery, hanged two captive British soldiers, and booby-trapped their bodies, and carried out a series of bombings, including, most notoriously, an attack on British headquarters at Jerusalem's King David Hotel. An act that killed not only numerous British officials, but also scores of Arab and Jewish civilians. And Begin's account of these activities? Quote, historically, we were not terrorists. We were strictly speaking anti-terrorists. My emphasis. Words pack power, and these definitions are laden with values, often wildly idiosyncratic ones. Here's an example, namely the ways I think about the word competition. A. Competition. Your lab team races the Cambridge group to a discovery, exhilarating but embarrassing to admit to. B. Competition. Playing pickup soccer, fine as long as the best player shifts sides if the score becomes lopsided. C. Competition. Your child's teacher announces a prize for the best outlining your fingers Thanksgiving turkey drawing. Silly and perhaps a red flag. If it keeps happening, maybe complain to the principal. D. Competition. Whose deity is more worth killing for? Try to avoid. But the biggest reason for the definitional challenge was emphasized in the introduction. These terms mean different things to scientists living inside different disciplines. Is aggression about thought, emotion, or something done with the muscles? Is altruism something that can be studied mathematically in various species, including bacteria, or are we discussing moral development in kids? And implicit in these different perspectives, disciplines have differing tendencies toward lumping and splitting. These scientists believe that behavior X consists of two different subtypes, whereas those scientists think it comes in 17 flavors. Let's examine this with respect to different types of aggression. Animal behaviorists dichotomize between offensive and defensive aggression, distinguishing between, say, the intruder and the resident of a territory. The biology underlying these two versions differs. Such scientists also distinguish between conspecific aggression between members of the same species, and fighting off a predator. Meanwhile, criminologists distinguish between impulsive and premeditated aggression. Anthropologists care about differing levels of organization underlying aggression, distinguishing among warfare, clan vendettas, and homicide. Moreover, various disciplines distinguish between aggression that occurs reactively, in response to provocation, and spontaneous aggression, as well as between hot-blooded emotional aggression and cold-blooded instrumental aggression. In other words, I want your spot to build my nest, so scram or I'll peck your eyes out. This isn't personal, though. Then there's another version of this isn't personal, targeting someone just because they're weak and you're frustrated, stressed, or pained and need to displace some aggression. Such third-party aggression is ubiquitous. Shock a rat and it's likely to bite the smaller guy nearby. A beta-ranking male baboon loses a fight to the alpha, and he chases the omega male. I've observed a remarkable example of this among the baboons that I've studied in East Africa. Over the 30-odd years I've watched them, I've seen a handful of instances of what I believe warrants the seemingly human-specific term rape, where a male baboon will forcibly vaginally penetrate a female who is not in estrus, who is not sexually receptive, who struggles to prevent it, and who gives every indication of distress and pain when it happens. And each of these instances has been the act of the former alpha male in the hours after he's been toppled from his position. When unemployment rises, so do rates of domestic violence. Depressingly, as will be discussed in Chapter 4, displacement aggression can decrease the perpetrator's stress hormone levels. Giving ulcers can help you avoid getting them. And of course, there is the ghastly world of aggression that is neither reactive nor instrumental, but is done for pleasure. Then there are specialized subtypes of aggression. Maternal aggression, which often has distinctive endocrinology. There is the difference between aggression and ritualistic threats of aggression. For example, many primates have lower rates of actual aggression than of ritualized threats, such as displaying their canines. Similarly, aggression in Siamese fighting fish is mostly ritualistic. There is a great contemporary version of human ritualistic aggression, namely the haka ritual performed by rugby teams from New Zealand. Just before the game starts, the Kiwis line up midfield to perform this Neo-Maori war dance, complete with rhythmic stamping, menacing gestures, guttural shouting, and histrionically threatening facial expressions. It's cool to see from afar on YouTube. Even better is watching the YouTube clip of Robin Williams doing a haka display at Charlie Rose on PBS. While up close it typically appears to scare the bejesus out of the other team, however, some opposing teams have come up with ritualistic responses straight out of the baboon playbook, getting in the hakaers' faces and trying to stare them down. Other teams come out with ritualistic responses that are pure human uniqueness, ignoring the hakaers while nonchalantly warming up, using their smartphones to film the display, thereby emasculating it to something vaguely touristy in flavor, tepidly applauding afterward with great condescension. One response initially seems uniquely human, but would be understandable to other primates after some translating. The sports newsletter from one Australian team printed a photo of the mortal enemy New Zealanders doing a haka, with each player brandishing a photoshopped woman's handbag. Getting a definitional handle on the more positive terms isn't easy either. There's empathy versus sympathy, reconciliation versus forgiveness, and altruism versus pathological altruism. For a psychologist, the last term might describe the empathic codependency of enabling a partner's drug use. For a neuroscientist, it describes a consequence of a type of damage to the frontal cortex. In economic games of shifting strategies, individuals with such damage fail to switch to less altruistic play when being repeatedly stabbed in the back by the other player, despite being able to verbalize the other player's strategy. When it comes to the more positive behaviors, the most pervasive issue is one that ultimately transcends semantics. Does pure altruism actually exist? Can you ever separate doing good from the expectation of reciprocity, public acclaim, self esteem, or the promise of paradise? This plays out in a fascinating realm, as reported in Larissa McQuarrie's 2009 New Yorker piece, The Kindest Cut. It concerns people who donate organs not to family members or close friends, but to strangers, an act of seemingly pure altruism. But these Samaritans unnerve everyone, sowing suspicion and skepticism. Is she expecting to get paid secretly for her kidney? Is she that desperate for attention? Will she work her way into the recipient's life and do a fatal attraction? What's her deal? The piece suggests that these profound acts of goodness unnerve because of their detached, affectless nature. This speaks to an important point that runs through the book. As noted, we distinguish between hot-blooded and cold-blooded violence. We understand the former more, can see mitigating factors in it. Consider the grieving, raging man who kills the killer of his child. And conversely, affectless violence seems horrifying and incomprehensible. This is the sociopathic contract killer, the Hannibal Lecter who kills without his heart rate nudging up a beat. Hey, what's up, William Freeman? Good to see you. I'm over here stuck at work. I'm not supposed to be here this late. Cliff note. Fascinating, grotesque example of this is Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a woman, it's overwhelmingly a female disorder, generates illnesses in her child out of a pathological need for the attention, care, and envelopment of the medical system. This is not someone falsely telling the pediatrician that her child had a fever last night. This is giving children emetics to induce vomiting, poisoning them, smothering them to induce symptoms of hypoxia, often with fatal consequences. One feature of the disorder is a stunning lack of affect in the mothers. One would expect an air of spittle-flecked madness to match the actions. Instead, there is a cold detachment, as if they could simply be lying to a veterinarian about their supposedly sick goldfish, or to customer service at Sears about their supposedly broken toaster, if doing so would bring the same psychological benefits. For a lengthy overview of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, see R. Sapolsky, Nursery Crimes. Sorry, I have to periodically check for trucks and such. Love you too, William. I didn't bring any food or caffeine with me because I was only supposed to be here for 4 hours. But it is what it is. Actually, it was a snafu in my schedule. Schadenfreude. It's why cold-blooded killing is a damning descriptor. Similarly, we expect that our best, most pro-social acts will be warm-hearted. Similarly, we expect that our best, most pro-social acts be warm-hearted, filled with positive affect. Cold-blooded goodness seems oxymoronic, is unsettling. I was once at a conference of neuroscientists and all-star Buddhist monk meditators, the former studying what the brains of the latter did during the meditation. One scientist asked one of the monks whether he ever stops meditating because his knees hurt from all that cross-leggedness. He answered, "Sometimes I'll stop sooner than I planned, but not because it hurts. It's not something I notice. It's an act of kindness to my knees." Whoa, I thought. These guys are from another planet. A cool, commendable one, but another planet nonetheless. Crimes of passion and good acts of passion make the most sense to us. Nevertheless, as we shall see, dispassionate kindness often has much to recommend it. Hot-blooded badness, warm-hearted goodness, and the unnerving incongruity of the cold-blooded versions raise a key point, encapsulated in a quote of Freud's emphasized by Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize winner and concentration camp survivor. Quote, "The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite is indifference." The biologies of strong love and strong hate are similar in many ways, as we'll see. Which reminds us that we don't hate aggression. We hate the wrong kind of aggression, but love it in the right context. And conversely, in the wrong context, our most laudable behaviors are anything but. The motoric features of our behaviors are less important and challenging to understand than the meaning behind behind our muscles' actions. This is shown in a subtle study. Subjects in a brain scanner entered a virtual room where they encountered either an injured person in need of help or a menacing extraterrestrial. Subjects could either bandage or shoot the individual. Pulling a trigger and applying a bandage are different behaviors, but they are similar insofar as bandaging the injured person and shooting the alien are both the right things. And contemplating those two different versions of doing the right thing activated the same circuitry in the most context-savvy part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And thus, those key terms that anchor this book are most difficult to define because of their profound context dependency. I will therefore group them in a way that reflects this. I won't frame the behaviors to come as either pro or antisocial, too cold-blooded for my expository tastes, nor will they be labeled as good and evil, too hot-blooded and frothy. Instead, as our convenient shorthand for concepts that truly defy brevity, this book is about the biology of our best and worst behaviors. Well, that's one way to kill a little bit of time. And I'll be here for a while longer. A couple more hours yet. So, yeah, look out for more reading from the monkey.